Louise, I'm so glad you decided to take up oil painting.
Living in a neighborhood with you in the neighborhood makes you so enthusiastic about painting.
Thank you. Look, I'll be with you in just a minute, okay?
Do you mind if I look around a little?
No, help yourself.
Thank you.
Robert Henry, a famous American art teacher, once said that when art is alive in anyone, that person becomes an inventive, searching, daring, self-expressing creature. The artist is the one who leaves the crowd and goes pioneering, like Manet, Corot, Cézanne, and Vermeer. Few have the courage and stamina to be a student of art, for the course is a lonely one, and faint praise or censure by others a constant menace. But the true student paints for self-satisfaction and is not discouraged by rejection. And always there is a constant search for improved ability to express creative thoughts that excite the artist. One of America's leading artists, Margaret Holland Sargent, has been the subject of feature stories in Southwest Art and American Artist. She teaches art at the National Artist Seminar. Sargent also was the first woman artist certified by the American Portrait Society, an association organized by Robert Fleet Hubbell.
Okay, today we're going to cover the fundamentals of oil painting. We're going to learn about the materials and supplies you'll need, about how to stretch a canvas and lay out your palette and clean your brushes, how to mix colors to get various hues, and finally how to use the neutrals so that you get the feeling of depth in your paintings.
Sounds wonderful.
Okay, let's go and stretch the canvas.
All right. I went downtown the other day and bought some stretcher strips, and they were crooked.
Oh, that happens all the time. You have to watch them, make sure they're not warped and that they're straight. Now, I have a pair here, one 16-inch, one 20-inch. Put those corners together so the space disappears. Mm-hmm. And I have this that I prepared earlier. I take the mallet, make sure those corners are all joined. Now we'll check for squareness.
Oh, I have to buy this?
No, you don't need a big old carpenter's square like that, but this would be just as good.
Good.
And another way is to test it in a door jamb. I tested this corner and I'm sure it's square.
I think you're making that so my painting will fit the frame.
That's right. If you're careful now, then it avoids restretching it later. Now, I've prepared a canvas here. I've cut a piece that's 1.5 inches larger on each border than my actual size. And the first step is to staple that to the stretcher strips. And I start at one end and begin in the middle. And we flip it over, staple the next one. Now you'll see why I added that 1.5 inches.
Oh.
See, my canvas pliers need that much to get a good grip. You can exert much more force with that than you can with your own hands. There.
Now you keep rotating?
Yes, you do one in each middle section and you work toward the corner. You put a next staple toward the corner. This avoids the wrinkling.
Oh.
And you use the same side each time you rotate. And you keep going around until you reach the corner. Now at the corner, you do one side in the normal fashion to the end and rotate the canvas, and you fold it here and tuck that edge underneath, you see? Right like that, so it just disappears. Grab this with your canvas pliers, pull gently down, and you finish off that end.
Now you keep rotating the canvas until you come to the corners.
Right. So we're here at the other end, and put a staple in the normal way.
Good.
Rotate the canvas, make our fold, tuck it under, nice and neatly. Can you see that?
Beautiful. It's
Okay.
lovely. That's lovely.
Pliers, give it a gentle tug, and pop in the final staple on that corner. We rotate this end. Start it up here. We put our final or normal staple into the edge. Rotate, make a fold, fold it under, grab it with the pliers, and pop in another staple.
Great.
So we have all 4 corners. Now the next step is adding the 8 wedges. You take the wedge, little wooden wedge, with the flat side parallel to the strip, put it in that corner. Another one, slip in the same way down into that corner. Same thing here and here. When you have 4 in, take your little hammer, give that a tap, rotate it, give that a tap, rotate, tap a little here, and a little here. Now you repeat that with the second 4 wedges, getting them so that they fit in these corners, like this. I mean, the canvas seems pretty taut now, but this is insurance for the future, so that if you have humidity problems or temperature changes, it'll stay taut, and if it doesn't, then someone could take the painting and pound the wedges in again. Canvas is nice and taut. When it sounds like a drum, you know you're in business. Now we staple the excess canvas to the stretcher strips.
Why don't you just cut off that excess?
Oh, you don't want to do that. What if you wanted to re-stretch it later? You wouldn't have anything to grab onto.
Why couldn't I go down and buy one of the pads downtown?
Well, you could do that. I have a pad here. It would be okay for practice work. It has a linen texture on it. And you could get a board like this. It's a cardboard with linen glued on it, but the linen is gauze thin, and eventually the cardboard will warp. So I really think if you want to value your work, you just stretch your own. Now, why don't we take a look at the easel and the paint stand?
All right.
I like to paint at eye level and standing up, so this is just about the right positioning for me. This is my studio easel. It's a very adjustable and flexible, and it goes back and forth. It's on rollers, just what I like for my studio. And this is the first easel I had, which is aluminum, and it's good for traveling. I still use it. Now let's take a look at the paint stand. You can see that the brushes are recessed so that they don't fall over and they're out of the way. Now I have a paper towel rack over on the left because I am right-handed, so when I use a brush with paint, I can clean it off and drop it into the waste paper basket all in one motion. This is where I keep my brushes, my brush rack, because you know you should use a different brush for every color of paint. Then you can store them right here.
How do you clean your brushes when you're painting?
Oh, I'll show you that in a minute. But these notches, let me tell you about those. They keep the brushes from falling off and falling into one another, and they're also separated so they're easy to pick up. Now, I'll show you how to clean the brushes.
Tomato can.
Right. And this is what's inside.
Tuna fish can.
First, you punch a lot of holes in the top with an awl or an ice pick. Then you drop the can into the tomato can and add a pint of paint thinner. Makes a wonderful brush cleaning mechanism with just the cost of a pint of paint thinner. And Howard Sandon gave this idea to all his students years ago. Bless him for it.
Yes.
Now, you see, when you have a dirty brush, and this is full of paint thinner, you rub the brush over the metal, and it doesn't disturb the pigment that has dropped down before from previous cleanings. Then, after it's allowed to settle a while, the liquid itself becomes clear again. You may not think of a piece of glass as a palette, but that's what I use.
It's very big.
Well, this is quite artistic, but it's just too small. If I put all my paints out here, I wouldn't have any place to mix them. Now, let's take a look at the drawers. Since I do a lot of portrait work, my top drawer has my flesh tones and shadow mixtures that I mix and tube myself. The next drawer has my neutrals.
Now, what are neutrals?
Well, black is a neutral, white is a neutral, and then the grays in between are all neutrals. I'll show you that on the palette a little bit later. And I have the regular colors, my cadmium reds and cadmium oranges and cadmium yellows, and they're all placed out the same position as my palette. So when I want to get one out of the drawer, I can reach right, put my finger right on the right one. The same way with my blues and the greens. And back here I have some tubed mixtures that I've mixed myself that I use in landscapes.
Good.
Now, in this drawer I have my tissues, my hand cleaner, extra pair of glasses, all the little things that I'll need while I'm painting. And in the bottom drawer, I store all my bulky items like paper towels and spray cans of varnish. By the way, never store an oily rag in a closed plastic bag or in a closed drawer because you're liable to cause a fire with spontaneous combustion.
I'll remember that.
Now, with the varnishes, there's a retouch varnish that's wonderful if you have to stop painting for a couple days or so and you want to go back, but the paint has started to dry out. You just spray a couple seconds of this retouch varnish and it brings the paint back to the natural gloss that you started with. Now, this is your final Damar varnish, and you want to put that on your painting when you finished.
Great.
But you mustn't do it until the painting's at least 6 months old. It has to be completely dry, and if it's really thick paint, then you'll want to wait longer than that. If you're wondering why everything's on rollers, the easel can be moved to where the light is best in my studio. I can roll the paint stand right up next to the easel.
That's wonderful. That's a wonderful paint stand. I'd like to have one like it, but I can't afford to buy something
Oh,
like
I
that.
know. I understand. This is a professional type of stand, but here's a way you can get by much less expense. You know what this is? A baby's bassinet.
Oh.
I converted it, and I used to paint on it with a plastic top here. This has a lot of storage space. It's on rollers, and I took an old picture frame, notched it out. Now I can put my used brushes right along there as I paint.
That's wonderful.
Actually, my first one was an old tea cart, but I found that it wasn't quite the right height. I like my work to be up here. Oh, and I have a friend who's a professional artist. He bought an old dresser, put wheels on it, and it's a perfect height, and it has lots of storage space.
Now, what kind of palette knives and brushes do I need?
I suggest you have a minimum of 2 palette knives and a spatula. This little one has a very flexible tip, and it's good for mixing paints, and it's also great for scraping paint off the canvas if you want to repaint a passage that's gone wrong. The spatula is less flexible, and it's good for quick cleanups. At the end of the day, you can clean your palette clean. Now let's take a look at the brushes. I suggest you start with a minimum of 26. It seems like a lot, but you'll need them all. These are all the bristle brushes here. Starting out with the number 18 is wonderful for massing in your backgrounds. It gets the job done in a hurry. Then the rest from here to here are all filberts.
Oh, any connection to the nut called filbert?
I don't know. They have a long rounded tip. Maybe somebody thought they looked like a filbert or a hazelnut or something. Anyway, we have 2 12s, 2 10s, and 2 8s, and they're great for massing in the larger areas. 6 number 6s and 6 number 4s, because you'll probably be using those most often, and you want to keep a separate brush for each color if possible. And then 2 number 2s should take care of that. Oh, and here's another bristle brush. It's a fan blender, number 6. It's good for softening edges and blending from one passage to another, but you want to be careful not use it too much. The last 4 are your sable brushes, and I suggest you have a long flat number 4, flat number 2, and 2 rounds, a number 2 and a number 1.
Sable brushes are for smooth painting?
Yes, yes, you want to use them sparingly. They're good for highlights in the eye, for instance.
Aren't brushes awfully expensive?
Yes, they are. But you really want to get the best quality you can afford, Louise, because painting is difficult enough without having to spend time picking hairs off your canvas or struggling with the brush that's going all different directions. Now, this chart lists all 26 brushes. The quantity is in the first column, followed by the brush number. The larger brushes have the larger numbers. Let's talk about the colors on the palette. A color has 3 characteristics: hue, intensity, and value. Hue is defined as the name of the color in terms of red, yellow, blue, and so forth.
Like orange, a mixture of red and yellow.
That's right. I have a chart showing the colors on the palette. Let's go take a look at it.
Fine.
Here's a chart showing all the paints on our palette. We have 14 hued colors and 8 neutrals. Now, starting with the hued colors, alizarin crimson, the darkest of the 4 reds. The rest are all cadmium barium colors, beginning with red deep, red medium, red light, orange deep, orange, yellow deep, yellow medium, and yellow light. Most companies have an orange that's this color, but this orange deep is sometimes difficult to find. Grumbacher puts out cadmium barium orange that's this color, and Liquitex calls theirs vivid red orange. There are 3 blues: ultramarine blue, the darkest, cobalt blue, and cerulean blue. Finishing off the palette colors are phthalo green and viridian. As I mentioned, there are 8 neutrals on our palette, the darkest being ivory black, with 6 shades of gray in between, ending with the lightest permalba white. The 6 neutrals on our chart, or shades of gray, are placed according to their values corresponding to the colors above. For instance, number 3 is under red deep, number 4 is under red medium, number 5 is red light, and so forth, ending with 6, 7, and 8 under yellow medium. Fortunately, Liquitex puts out a series of grays with these same numbers. Saves you a lot of mixing time. You'll notice that gray number 7 stands sort of by itself, but it actually is matched up with 2 colors. The yellow deep and orange have the same value, or lightness and darkness, as the shade of gray number 7. Number 6 is matched with orange deep because it has exactly the same value, or lightness and darkness, as orange deep. If you could visualize this blob of paint as an orange, the fruit orange, and you wanted to make that orange look round and this end recede into the distance, you would just add a touch of gray number 6 to a touch of orange deep and place it on that side, and you'd be amazed at how that would appear to be going away from the eye. Of the 3 blues on your palette, cerulean has a value of about 3, so it's placed here. The other 2 are darker than 3, so they go to the left, as well as viridian and phthalo green, and alizarin is darker than 3. Now, with these colors on your palette, you can mix almost any hue you need.
What kind of white do you use in the painting?
I buy the large tubes of permalba.
Oh,
I like it. It's creamy, it mixes well with the other paints, and it doesn't yellow. The only drawback is it's pretty expensive. You don't want to buy lead white because that is poisonous, but a titanium zinc would be a pretty good substitute.
good. Now, what do you use to thin, to mix your paint?
That is the question most people ask. I use a copal painting medium to thin, very sparingly. Copal is a durable varnish. It's a resin from tropical trees. Some artists use spirits of pure gum turpentine, but I avoid that. I just really am afraid it's not as durable, and I don't like that dull finish it leaves.
You've convinced me. I'll use copal.
Good. Now I think it's time we talked about lighting.
Fine idea. I noticed that your windows point toward Griffith Park. It's natural north light.
Yes, I almost always paint in natural north light. There are no direct shadows. It's more consistent. It's a cool bluish light. And since the sun doesn't shine directly in, I don't have any shadows that move around all day.
Do you ever paint by fluorescent light?
I used to, but I found that the fluorescent, even the daylight tubes, would cause me to add too much red. And it was really apparent when I took it outdoors to look at it.
How does painting indoors with a north light compare with painting outdoors?
Well, my studio north light doesn't change much during the day, but outside you have to paint really fast because you have about 2 hours as the sun is going across the sky before the shadows change too drastically. So you have to really get cracking when you're painting outside on a landscape or even a portrait. And remember that it's a good idea to position your easel under a tree or somewhere in the shadow so that the direct light isn't falling right on the canvas.
At different times of the day, you can get dissimilar paintings?
Oh, definitely. In 1891, Claude Monet painted 2 haystacks in a French field 12 times in one day. He was fascinated about how light changes the color intensity of a painting. You know, if you don't have any north light, you may have to use artificial light when you paint.
That's like the basement I paint in.
Yes, and some artists, by necessity, have to paint at night. So you may find yourself painting with an artificial light on your canvas and on the subject. You know, artificial light can be a help because it gives you a sharper shadow pattern, and so it's a good way to look at an object. Now, let's go take a look at the lighting setup. All right, now this is a 150-watt flood light, a reflector flood, and it lights up my paint stand with the palette on the top, as well as the easel and the canvas.
What is that in front of the light?
Well, that's a blue filter. And if you want a low-cost filter holder, get a 3-pound can of coffee, and with a few tin snip cuts, you can convert it.
And the blue filter?
It converts the tungsten light to daylight.
But I still don't see why you need the blue filter.
Well, incandescent light has a lot of red and yellow quality to it. So the blue filter neutralizes that and makes it just seem more natural.
So if I painted with an uncorrected light, the painting would look too yellow and red?
It sure would, especially if you were looking at it in a natural light. Now, let's take a look at the light I use on my arrangement. The light on my subject, which is an apple in this case, is a 150-watt parabolic reflector spotlight with another blue filter. Now, the advantage of using a spotlight on the subject is that you get very strong shadow patterns, so you can see immediately where it goes into shadow. Let's review the 3 characteristics of a color. First, hue, the name of the color in terms of red, yellow, blue, and so forth. Second, intensity or vividness of the color. A color has its highest intensity when it is pure or completely free of mixture with its complementary color.
Complementary colors? You're going to have to explain that.
Well, first let me define primary color. A primary color is one that you have to start with. You can't use other colors to mix it. Yellow, for instance, is a primary color.
But how many other primary colors are there like yellow?
Red, and blue are primaries. Let's look at a color chart. This color chart has the three primary colors. Here's red medium, yellow medium, and cobalt blue. The complementary of red medium is directly across the color chart. You get this color by mixing the colors on both sides. Here are dabs of cobalt blue and yellow medium, and when I mix them, the result is this green, which is the complementary of red, and red is the complementary of green.
I'm still not sure what that term complementary means.
Patience. I'll show you as soon as I mix the complementary colors of blue and yellow. I'm going to mix cobalt blue and red medium.
That looks like purple.
Yes, purple is the complementary of yellow, and actually, as I said, each color is the complementary of the other. Now, I'll mix equal parts of yellow medium and red medium.
That looks sort of, well, orange.
Right. Now, what is orange the complementary of?
This blue.
Right.
Blue, that's right.
Right. Complementary colors enhance each other. That is, a color seems most intense when it's next to its complementary color. Now, purple seems more intense when it's next to yellow, and it's easier to see when they're side by side. Orange appears most intense next to blue.
And vice versa?
Correct. The same for red and green. If you want to make a sunset with yellows and oranges seem bright or intense, use their complementaries, purple and blue, in the area near the sunset.
If you want to intensify red, you put it next to green?
Right. And if you wanted a green to stand out, you put red nearby. But there's an interesting aspect of complementaries. Side by side, they intensify each other, but mix them and they cancel each other out. Here are dabs of yellow and purple, the complementary colors next to each other. I'll mix them, and the result is a muddy neutral. The same thing happens when you mix other complementary colors. Here's orange and blue. And red and green mixed. Another muddy neutral. Now I believe you'll find it easy to understand the second characteristic of a color, intensity. The intensity of a color is its degree of freedom from its complementary color. For example, the more purple you add to yellow, the less intense the yellow is. Just for fun, let's mix some more colors around the circle. First, the red and orange. Nice deep orange color. Then the orange and yellow medium. You get an orange that's a little lighter. And this should produce a familiar color.
Chartreuse.
Right. Now, green with the cobalt blue. I don't know, it's kind of hard to define that particular color. It's, I guess, blue-green, good as any. Here's your cobalt blue with the purple. That's pretty. That's a lovely shade of purple, sort of a violet. Now, the purple and the red medium. And that completes the basic 12 colors on this color chart. Here's the color chart we just completed, the primaries being yellow medium, cobalt blue, and red medium. Now here's another chart And I used the primaries yellow deep, ultramarine blue, and red deep. On the third chart, I used yellow light combined with cerulean blue and red light. You can see the interesting combinations you get. This is a color wheel similar to the wheel we made earlier with yellow medium, red medium, and cobalt blue. But even though it has the same 12 colors, we have an additional 12 circles on the inside for lighter shades and 12 on the outside for darker shades. You'd be amazed at how much different the colors will look when you lighten them with white or darken them with a little black. I'm mixing white and yellow medium to get a lighter value of yellow. There we are. Now you're in for a surprise. What do you get by adding a little black to yellow?
I haven't the slightest idea.
Voila!
Green.
For the hue next door, dark orange, the procedure was the same. By adding white, we got this lighter value, and by adding black, a small amount because black is powerful, the result was...
Isn't that an earth color?
Right, close to raw sienna. Here's the chart we completed shortly ago with yellow medium, cobalt blue, and red medium, and you can see the 12 variations we got by adding a little white to each of those colors, and the 12 darker shades or darker values by adding a little black to the colors. Our second chart, we used yellow deep, ultramarine blue, and red deep, and got these different variations by adding white in these inner circles here, and the darker shades or dark, rich earth colors by adding a little black to the same colors. On the third chart, we started out with yellow light, red light, and cerulean blue, and by adding a little white, we get this lovely variation of pastels, and then these rich, darker values along the outside by adding a little black. You know, Louise, I think it would be a great idea for you to do these charts at home, let them dry, and keep them for reference.
I'll do just that. Now, when the paints have dried and I've got them all set in order, I'm going to keep them in a notebook, like you said.
Terrific.
Good.
You know, let me tell you a secret of success. You become so expert at mixing these colors that you can have a friend point to one with the rest of them covered, and you can tell them exactly what went in there to get that color. Why, you can mix anything you need. Here's a chart showing earth colors. Here are the colors you can mix yourself. The names are on the left. Burnt umber, raw umber, burnt sienna, Venetian red, raw sienna, and yellow ochre. The colors you'll need to mix these are ivory black, gray number 3, gray number 4, gray number 5, red medium, red light, orange deep, orange, and yellow deep. For instance, if you were mixing a Venetian red, you would use 1 part of gray number 3 and 3 parts of cadmium red light, giving you a total of 4 parts. Let's review. First, hue. Hue is the name of the color. Next, intensity. We saw how to dull the intensity of a color. You add some of its complementary color. And third, value. A black and white picture of the palette shows that all paints have values. That is, all paints have specific degrees of lightness and darkness. But white, black, and grays don't have hues. They're neutrals. See the definition of a neutral at the bottom of the chart? The white, the black, and the 6 grays on the palette are the neutrals you'll be using in painting. You know, Louise, a biographer of Winslow Homer once related that Homer was delighted when he learned that if he got his values right, he could use violently contrasting hues without fracturing the unity of his painting.
Are we talking about why the 6 grays are matched up with the various colors?
Yes, partly, because that way it helps you learn the value of each color by having those grays lined up there. And we discussed how to make the orange look round. Well, I have a painting here of an apple that I think will help understand that same principle. I used all 4 of the reds, And when I got to the cadmium red light along this edge, I used a little bit of the gray number 5 along with the red to make that edge appear as though it's going around the corner. Do you understand? Okay, now down here where I used the alizarin, what shade of gray would I have used there?
I don't know.
Why don't we take a look at the chart? All right, here we are. Now the question was, if I had an object with alizarin crimson, what would I add to the edge of that object to make it appear to recede?
Alizarin crimson is darker than gray 3. Did you add gray 3 and a touch of black?
That's right. Very good. In case you have a problem getting the Liquitex grays or there's a delay in getting them, there's a series of 6 neutral grays. I've been working on formulas for you so that you could mix your own, and I've come up with something that's just about right. Let's take a look at the chart. Here we have our series of 6 grays. The key gray is number 4. You want to use 1 unit of black and 1.5 units of white. Let me show you. These are common kitchen measuring spoons, and I have a 1/2 teaspoon of black, a half teaspoon of permalba white, and a 1/4 teaspoon of permalba white. Now, when I said unit, I meant 1 measure of each thing. In other words, 1/2 teaspoon in this case is a unit. So we have 1 unit of black and 1.5 units of white. And I got exact measures by just taking my palette knife and scraping across the top of the spoon. It's also, this round tip palette knife is a good way to get the paint out of the measuring. You just mix all these together and you'll get gray number 4. Now let's see how to mix gray number 5. You can see why we had to mix gray number 4 first, because for number 5, we use 1 part of 4 to 1 part of white. Let me show you. Here we have 1 part gray number 4 and 1 part white, and mixed together, they make gray number 5. Now let me explain how we mix the other 4 grays. Gray number 6, you'll need 1 part of gray number 5 and 1 part white. Gray number 7 takes 1 part of 6 and 2 parts of white. Gray number 8 takes 1 part 7 and 2 parts white. For gray number 3, you'd need 1 part of gray number 4 and 1 part black. Now, if you do a lot of painting and you use a lot of grays, you don't want to waste them at the end of a day. Now, here's the solution for you. You can buy empty tubes like this by the dozen from your art supply stores. You take your spatula, fill the tube to within 1 inch of the top, gently tap it down so that all the air bubbles are gone, and then let me show you how to close the end. Here's your tube filled with paint. Take the palette knife and gently press down at the end. Rotate the tube over to form 1 join. Repeat that again. So you have a double fold. Take your canvas pliers and really give it a good squeeze so you seal that edge. Now you have something that looks very much like a tube of toothpaste. At this point, you want to mark on the tube what shade of gray or which color you're using. And I found it's helpful too to just take a dab of the paint and put it on the cap and let it dry. The series of grays we mixed before were a little bit on the cool side. If you want to warm them up so that they'll be closer to the Liquitex gray series, I suggest you add just a drop, a little touch of cadmium yellow deep to your number 4 mixture. That's your basic mixture when you start. Then each subsequent mixture, you need even less. I'm warning you, don't put too much of this in. Just a touch will warm it up nicely, so you'll have a nice series of warm grays. I've discussed the theory of giving depth to a painting. Now I'll demonstrate how it's done. Now, I'm going to take a number 2 filbert bristle, and one of my neutrals, a number 5, I believe this is, and just quickly position the apple about where I want it on canvas. Where the highlight's going to go and where the shadow. The cast shadow comes up this way. Not concerned today with backgrounds. Take another filbert, and we'll work from dark to light, so I dipped in my alizarin crimson, which is the value of that shadow side, and it seems to be about the right color as well. Bring it around, get the areas that have that dark red in. The next darkest red is my red deep, and that seems to be color in this area, just as it comes out of shadow and works around. Now I'm going into my red medium to make a transition. Lock in some. The local color of the apple seems to be a combination of red light and red medium, so I'll quickly mask that in. You know, local color means the general color of the object, and it appears its brightest and most intense right near the highlight, when here's our highlight. So now I'm going to illustrate the principle of the grays. I see where this red, medium, and light combination goes right over to the edge and away from our eye in the light. And the corresponding gray would be a number 5 and a number 4. So I'm going to mix a little bit of those two with my red medium and red light, mix them together, and apply them right here on the edge. And that will give the feeling that that edge is turning away from your eye. We want to deceive the eye into thinking that that is turning away and going away from the light and from your eye. We're working with a two-dimensional object here, trying to make it look three-dimensional, so we use all the tricks we can. And I've mixed some corresponding gray with the red that would be up at this part of the apple to make that edge seem to disappear. I notice that there's a greenish center to the apple. I'll use my viridian with a touch of yellow light and one of my grays. Let's try number 5. Just touch it in here to get the feeling of that deep green center. And as it goes out toward the edge, it picks up in yellow. So I'll use a little more yellow in my mixture till it comes out. And part of that color just continues right on down into the red of the apple there. We'll get some coming toward the back. Now where that color goes into the distance, we also pick up one of our corresponding grays. In this case, I think it's number 4. It's pretty close, and we'll just apply that right here on the edge where that yellow goes into the distance. And that will give the feeling that it's going away. Pick up the brush that I used in this area, fill that in. We have some of the same feeling right here going into that indentation. And on the very dark side, where I have used the alizarin, I'm going to dip into my number 3 with a touch of black so that that gray will seem to just go right away. Lighten it a tad with my red deep. Make that transition better. Now it's getting some reflected light from the drape. So I'll indicate that with a fresh brush and use a little of the red light, just a bit of that. Tone down a little with the corresponding gray and apply it right on this edge. It's getting that reflected light. The shadow automatically gives you a feeling of roundness. So the trick is to get the other side, the side that's on the light, to go away from your eye. And there's the shadow of that little stem. I'll put that in while I have the color on my brush. I see a rich red medium coming around here in that apple. Indicate that. Down. We have an accent place right under the apple in the shadow side. For that, I'm going to use my number 3 gray with a touch of alizarin. Just make that little accent spot blend right in. And go up the scale and use a little number 4. It's better to mix your colors on the palette and put them fresh on the painting, leave them, because otherwise you're liable to end up with mud. Now, let me step away and take a look. I think I can use almost more gray on the side that's going away from the eye, right on this edge here. A little bit lighter one will be better. Going up the scale till we get just the right. I think that seems to match that shade of red there. Now, right around the highlight is the, as I said, the local color is the lightest and brightest. That would be right in here. And at this point, I'm going to unify this side of the apple by bringing that up, around. This side is getting more reflected light than I've indicated, so I'm going to go into my number 6 and just put a touch of that. Nope, it would be too light. Go back down. That's just what I want. Okay. Keep your edges very soft, if you can. Now I have a stem to put in, and then the highlight, and we'll just about ready here. The stem is a shade of sort of a brown. You can use your grays and reds mixed together. It gives a nice brown. Put a stem coming right there. The top is darker, so we'll indicate that like so. And then there's deep shadow in there. I'm going to use my alizarin in number 3. right in that part of the apple. Since there's a local green color there, I think the smart thing to do would be to use the phthalo green, which is the darkest of my greens, for that little accent. And even though your eye doesn't really pick that up as being green, it is. Now let's try putting a highlight on that. Since the apple is a very smooth-skinned, shiny object, the highlight is going to be almost white because it's reflecting light directly back. It will have a tiny bit of the local color in it. Now, local color was the cadmium red medium and combination of red medium and red light. I'm mixing that with my gray number 8 to see if that will do it. We don't want to go to pure white because it would give it the feeling of a glassy look. So let's try that. I think that's just about what I want. There's little indentations around there, so we'll indicate them that way. Go back and take another dab of my number 8, almost pure this time, for the final highlight, right in the center of that group. Right there. Okay. So you see we have grayed the edges of each time the red comes to the edge. I've used a corresponding shade of gray, which I did also on the shadow side, but in addition I added a reflected light, which was part of the, it's a warmish light coming in from the drape here. Now if you want to, you could go on from here and finish the painting in the background and get the shadow, but I think for today I'm just going to leave it because we want to keep it simple. So this is a good exercise for you to do. Get yourself a piece of fruit and paint it as rapidly as you can using your palette colors and your shades of gray. Well, Louise, you know, we're living right here in the heart of the movie industry. And in the movie industry, when they come to the end of an artistic session, they say it's a wrap. And I think it's about time for us to wrap, which means let's clean up. So at the end of a day's painting session, most people just scrape their palettes together and all those colors make a big pile of mud, and then it's either thrown out or they save it for heaven knows what. Sometimes I do use that particular tone to tone my canvas to get the white look off, and it is helpful that way. But here's a way you can save your paints, because if you've gone to a lot of trouble mixing series for background colors or clothing colors and you want to use them the next day, you don't want to spend all that time mixing them again. So take an ice cube tray from the refrigerator and put the paints in the relative positions that they have on your palette, just like so. Another good receptacle for this would be a tackle box. You know, those clear plastic tackle boxes that fishermen take, put their flies and things in. Anyway, you finish filling this with the paints you want to save, and then you can make a nice little lid for that. Keep it airtight. See? And this whole thing goes into the freezer compartment of your refrigerator. And Louise, if you want to travel and pre-mix some colors like for landscapes or for portraits, you can pack them in these trays and they just zip right along so handily. Now, for the final cleanup of the palette, I usually just take a paper towel dipped in a little of my thinner and get that cleaned up in no time at all. Make sure you get all the paint off, and at the same time, wipe off excess paint from your brushes. And it's time to go get those brushes cleaned. Here we have the 5-gallon can. Inside, I have 4 smaller cans like the tomato can I showed you earlier, and each one of those has a tuna fish can in it. I start with the darkest looking can, and I sometimes do 2 brushes at a time, and I just rub them back and forth, and I proceed to the next can and the next, getting that paint off, and by the time I reach the 4th can, it's practically clear because all the paint has been deposited in the other 3 cans. And we'll start again with the next 2 brushes, whip them in that can, take off the excess, progress all the way around, and by the time you reach the end, those 2 brushes are clean. Now, it's time to go over and wash them out with soap, but before then, we replace the lid on the can to keep it from being a fire hazard, and also to keep the evaporation down, and this plastic liner helps there too. Here we have the brushes that we've washed in the 4 cans of paint thinner, and we just take a bar of soap, moisten the brush, and gently rub it across that bar of soap and get the soap up into the bristles near the ferrule. Then gently work it in the palm of your hand, getting that soap in. Work away all the loose bits of paint that might be there and wash away the paint thinner. Rinse the brush under the water. Gently force out the water and blot it with a paper towel, trying to keep that shape the brush has. You store it in a vertical position so that it doesn't lean against anything and ruin the shape. If you have a problem with the bristles spreading or working out, after a while this will happen, then I found it helpful to use a clothespin just at the very tip. Let it dry this way overnight. In this case, I do put it flat. And the next day, the paintbrush should be dry and back in shape. Well, we have covered a lot of ground today, Louise. Lighting, how to mix paints to get the right hues, how to reduce intensity by using complementary or a gray, on the great importance of learning your values. As for materials and tools, buy the best quality you can afford and take care of them. Your painting will be better and easier. And I know all those painting exercises will be a lot of work, but
Practice makes perfect.
right. So keep painting.